People think revenge looks like screaming, like slashed tires or broken plates. But mine came in a leather-bound book with gold-stamped corners and a ribbon tied in a gentle bow. I handed it to Diane on Mother's Day. We were sitting at a little brunch place in Richmond, the kind that tries too hard to feel southern, mismatched chairs, biscuit flights, lavender sweet tea. The sun was too bright for how heavy I felt inside. I had barely touched my food. She looked surprised when I gave her the gift bag. "Oh, Melissa," she said, smiling like she'd earned it. "You didn't have to do this." I didn't answer. Just watched her untie the ribbon. Here's the thing about Diane, she plays warm. She's got that soft, nurturing voice people fall for. She was my mother's nurse, back when Mom started getting tired all the time. That's what they called it. Tired. Like fatigue could explain how someone who read novels on the porch every morning suddenly couldn't get out of bed. My father married Diane 2 months after my mom died. 2 months. I was still boxing up Mom's sweaters when he proposed. I remember thinking, maybe they were just both lonely. Maybe Diane had helped him grieve. I told myself all kinds of things back then. I wanted to be good. Grateful. It's what your mother would have wanted, people kept saying. I was too raw to argue. So for years I smiled. Sent them Christmas cards. Showed up for Easter. Played the obedient daughter role. Meanwhile, I worked. I work in cybersecurity, boring stuff to most people. Mostly I look for patterns. Irregular transfers. Shadow files. Breadcrumbs. It started as a fluke. I was running a routine scan at work last May, and a familiar name popped up, F. Hartley. My dad. But the flagged account didn't make sense. It was a holding company with a buried trail. I knew what it meant. Or, at least, I knew what it could mean. So I followed it. Quietly. Carefully. That's how the album began. One recovered email here. A PDF of a forged medical directive there. I kept collecting, restoring, cross-referencing. Nights and weekends. The data was all there. It just needed someone to notice. Diane was flipping through the album now, still smiling on page 1. It was a photo of my mom at Lake Anna, barefoot and sunburnt, holding a book in her lap. Her favorite kind of day. Page 2 was an email printout dated 2 weeks before she died. It was from my dad to Diane. Subject line. Timeline. Her smile started to slip. Page 3 was a redacted bank transaction. Page 4 was a scanned image of a changed insurance policy. By page 6, Diane wasn't smiling anymore. I just sipped my tea. This was only the beginning. After that first flagged transfer, I couldn't sleep right for weeks. I told myself it was nothing, just a coincidence. But that little voice in my head, the one I usually ignore, kept saying, "You already know." So I did what I always do when something feels off. I pulled the thread. I stayed late at the office most nights, under the excuse of client anomalies. But I wasn't checking clients. I was checking my family. I ran public records, mapped shell companies, open metadata on old PDFs my dad had emailed me years ago. And with every step, I hated myself a little more. Because if I was right, if I was even halfway right, it meant my father had lied to me. Not just once, but for years. And Diane? Well, she didn't just lie. She played nurse, played wife, played innocent. Meanwhile, she was siphoning pieces of my mother's life away. Her money, her house, her memory. But here's what really broke me. The journals. Mom wasn't a dramatic person. She didn't complain. But she wrote things down. Always did. After I found the first email, I dug through the basement storage at my dad's house, under the excuse of retrieving old photo albums. What I found, in a dusty Rubbermaid bin, was a spiral notebook with her handwriting. Blue ink. Neat small letters. April 2nd. Nausea again this morning. Diane said it was the flu. Feels different. April 10th. Frank keeps missing my appointments. I don't feel like myself. April 14th. Diane's been giving me new supplements. Didn't tell Dr. Adler. I sat in my car and cried like I hadn't cried in a decade. I hated that I had to discover my mother's suffering like this. That no one had told me. That I hadn't seen it myself. I scanned every page. I filed it all. Then I pulled medical reports, autopsy forms, medication lists. I reached out to her former doctor, posing as a student doing research on unusual dosing patterns in hospice patients. He mentioned one name. Diane had access to her insulin kit. Said she was keeping it secure. Mom wasn't even diabetic. At that point, I knew what I was building wasn't just a scrapbook. It was a case file. It was a quiet prosecution. My dad had stopped replying to most of my texts by then. Said he was having trouble with his phone. Diane would answer with emojis. Hearts.
Smile.
She even called once, saying how much she appreciated my kindness lately. How proud my mom would be to see us getting along. I told her I was planning something special for Mother's Day. She said she couldn't wait. Neither could I. The thing about grief is it rewires your memory. I used to think my mom's last year was quiet. Peaceful even. She slept a lot. We'd sit together and say nothing. I remember brushing her hair once, and she smiled, but didn't say a word. Back then, I told myself that was enough. That silence meant comfort. But now I know that silence was fear. It was being drugged. When I went through her journals, I found entries that stopped mid-sentence. Like she fell asleep while writing. Or maybe worse. And it made me wonder how much of that final year was stolen from her and from me. I stopped talking to friends. I turned down dates. I stopped watching TV. My life shrank down to folders, flash drives, PDFs. Somewhere along the way, I stopped calling it evidence and started calling it mom. Some files came easy, like her old will. My mom had left everything to me. Everything. The house, the accounts, even her damn garden tools. She never trusted my dad with money, not even before Diane. But when I brought it up after the funeral, Dad had just waved it off. Said the will was old and no longer valid. He handed me a photocopy of a new one, clean, official-looking, notarized 6 weeks before her death. Everything went to him. I didn't push. I was numb then. And honestly, I was ashamed of caring. Like, asking questions made me greedy. Turns out, that new will? Forged. I found the original notary. She said flat out she'd never sign that name. I even ran it through signature verification software. It screamed fake. I added that to the album. Page 12. Then there were the text messages. I'd backed up my dad's old phone once years ago. He was always losing them. One of the backups still lived in my cloud account.
Ide forgotten.
But when I opened it, I found messages between him and Diane. He wrote, "What if she changes her mind?" She replied, "Then we act quickly. We can't wait around forever." A few days later, I talked to the doctor. All set. There's a special kind of nausea that comes from reading your parents plotting like criminals. And still, I didn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, I made a spreadsheet, indexed every document, coded it with tabs, created an encrypted backup in case anything happened to me. I wasn't being dramatic. I was being careful. People think love fades after death. But in my case, it calcified, hardened into purpose. They thought I was their grateful daughter. But I am my mother's daughter. And I remember everything. I didn't expect to hear from anyone. That's the truth. I figured if people knew something, they'd buried it deep, the way small towns do when the secrets are ugly and the players have money. My father wasn't rich, but he was respected. He built bridges, taught Sunday school. People liked him. So when I got the voicemail, I almost didn't listen. "Hi, this is, well, I don't know if you'll remember me. My name's Jenna. I used to work hospice back when your mother, anyway, I'm sorry. I've thought about calling you for years." I sat frozen in the parking lot of Kroger. I listened to it 3 times before I called back. Jenna sounded nervous, but relieved that I answered. She told me she'd only worked 3 weeks on Mom's case. Part of a fill-in rotation. Diane had made it clear she was handling things herself. Said family visits caused too much emotional disruption. Most of the nurses were shut out. Jenna was the only one who kept notes. "I kept thinking about the insulin," she said. "Your mom wasn't diabetic, but Diane insisted on keeping a locked kit in the fridge. Said it was just in case." I remember thinking that was odd, but I was new. And Diane, she was aggressive about her role. Like she didn't want anyone asking questions. Jenna had written a letter back then, to cover herself, in case anything ever came up. She never turned it in, just filed it away. But she scanned it for me. I added it to the album. Page 15. I remember hanging up and just shaking. Not crying. Just this cold, quiet tremor in my hands. Because now it wasn't just digital proof. It wasn't just files and logs. It was another human being, remembering what I remembered. Feeling what I'd felt, that something had gone horribly wrong. And still, the anger wasn't loud. It was low and steady, like a hum in the base of my skull. People think rage is theatrical, screaming in parking lots, throwing things across rooms. But mine was different. Mine sounded like fluorescent lights and scrolling code, and a highlighter across a paper trail. By this point, I had 23 pages in the album. Each one was worse than the last. Each one got me closer to her. Mother's Day was 2 weeks away. I'd chosen the restaurant already. One of those places with antique signs on the wall and mason jars instead of glasses. Diane loved that stuff. Said it reminded her of simpler times, which was rich, coming from a woman who spent most of her adult life manipulating paperwork and men. I kept playing the upcoming brunch in my head. Not just the handoff, but the moment. The exact second when she'd flip to the wrong page and realize it wasn't a gift. Not for her. But I still wasn't sure if my father knew. That was the part that twisted me up. There were moments when I remembered how he used to warm up soup for my mom, cut her toast into little squares. He didn't seem like the kind of man who could plan a murder, but then again, he was the kind of man who let things happen. Who looked away. Who wanted comfort more than truth. That kind of man is dangerous too. I drove by the house one night just to see. The curtains were open. Diane was inside, in one of my mother's old robes. My father sat on the couch, remote in hand, the same way he always had. Like nothing ever changed. Like nothing ever happened. That night, I added 3 more pages to the album. Scans of checks written to Diane before the will was changed. A property transfer form my mother never signed. A blurry but damning photo of a prescription bottle labeled with the wrong dosage. Page 27, 28, 29. I stopped sleeping properly. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. with phrases running through my head. All set. She won't fight it. Just let her rest. I'd see my mom's face in those moments between waking and sleep, when you can't tell if it's a memory or a dream. She never looked scared in those visions. Just tired. Resigned. That made me angrier than anything else. The week before the brunch, Diane called me again. Said she was so proud of me lately. That she could tell I'd come a long way. She always used that phrase, come a long way, like grief was a staircase and she was waiting at the top. I didn't say much. Just told her I had a surprise planned. She laughed. Said she couldn't wait. Neither could I. The album was now 32 pages. A full arc. From the first signs of neglect to the final forged document. I didn't include everything, not the backups, not the encrypted drive. Just enough to ruin brunch. It was almost time. The hostess led us to a table by the window. Diane commented on the flower arrangements, lavender and hydrangea in repurposed milk bottles. She loved that sort of thing. Said it made the place feel authentic. I said nothing. Just smiled like a good daughter. The album sat in the gift bag, beside her mimosa. I'd wrapped it in silver paper, tied it with a white ribbon. It looked like something you'd give to someone you cared about. Someone you respected. I'd spent an hour getting the bow right. She ordered the quiche. I asked for coffee. The waitress brought warm biscuits and honey butter. Diane tore one in half and said, I still think about your mother every day. You know that, don't you? I nodded. I didn't trust myself to speak. She kept talking, something about grace and healing, but it all blurred. The sound around us got soft, voices, clinks of cutlery, jazz playing over the speakers. I felt like I was sitting inside a fishbowl, watching someone else's brunch. My palms were cold, even though it was hot outside. Then she reached into the bag and pulled out the album. Oh, she said, grinning. Is this what you've been working on? You said you had something personal. I nodded again. My throat was tight. She opened the first page. A photo of my mother laughing on the back porch, her hair pulled up, iced tea in hand. The caption underneath read, where she always felt most herself. Diane smiled. Oh, that's lovely. Page 2, a prescription record showing 3 medications never approved by Irene's doctor. The smile faltered. Page 3, an email from my dad to a third-party financial advisor, requesting the fastest way to move joint funds to a sole account. Time-stamped 4 days before the medical emergency. Page 4, a copy of the false will. By page 5, she wasn't speaking anymore. By page 7, she was gripping the edge of the table. She reached for her mimosa, hands trembling. Spilled a bit. Didn't even notice. She turned to me, mouth half open. Confused. Panicked. She looked like she was trying to form a sentence that didn't exist. I said nothing. Page 10 was the nurse's letter. Page 12 was the notary's denial. Page 16 was the texts. Then we act quickly. She won't fight it. Diane closed the book. Slowly. Like it was radioactive. I took a long sip of coffee and finally spoke. I thought you might want something to remember her by. She stared at me. Her eyes weren't teary, just empty. I stood up, put cash on the table.
Didn't wait for change.
As I turned to leave, I leaned in close and said, just loud enough for her to hear, thinking of her today. After the brunch, I didn't hear from Diane.
Not that day.
Not the next. Not the week after. The silence didn't scare me. It comforted me. It meant the message landed. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, a dramatic voicemail, a legal threat, a visit from my father. But nothing came, which in hindsight was worse, because silence wasn't surrender. It was planning. 2 weeks later, my father sent a text. Can we talk? That's all it said.
No puntuación. No words. I stared at it for a long time.
Then I typed. You knew. He never responded. I guess that was his way of answering. There's a kind of grief no one talks about, the kind you feel when someone you love turns out to be smaller than the story you told yourself. My father wasn't a killer, but he was a coward. He let a woman poison his wife and did nothing. Maybe that made him worse. He didn't call,
Didn't show up.
he just went quiet. That summer was hot.
Oppressively so.
I remember sweat sticking to my back every time I sat in the driver's seat. I stopped listening to music on the way to work. Just silence. I drive past that same coffee shop where we had brunch, and my chest would tighten like a muscle that never relaxed. One morning, I woke up to a missed call and a news alert. Local man dies in single car accident. I didn't need to open it. I already knew. The car veered off the side of Route 60, straight into a tree.
No skid marks.
No signs of braking. The coroner ruled it undetermined. But I knew better. He'd been driving home from the golf course. Diane had stayed behind that day, supposedly with a migraine. I don't know what was said in the car, if anything. I don't know what was running through his head. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. The funeral was small. Closed casket. I didn't go. I couldn't pretend to mourn a man who chose silence. But I did go to the reading of the will. The real one, the one he'd updated again, a month after brunch. Funny how fear rewrites everything.
He left the house to Diane.
But everything else?
He left to me. The bank accounts. The trust.
Even the pension. No letter.
No explanation.
Just the documents, stapled together, like a quiet apology written in ink instead of words. I didn't cry. I just signed where I had to and walked out. I went home and opened the album again. Not for her, for me. Page by page. Sentence by sentence. As if I needed to prove again that I hadn't imagined it all. That the truth, once assembled, was real. That my mother had really been erased, and now, finally, restored. The lawyer was a thin man with crooked glasses and a voice like someone always clearing their throat. He handed me the folder like it weighed nothing, but to me it felt like 100 bricks. Inside, every account number, asset list, transfer confirmation.
Clean.
Legal. Sanitized. It felt wrong how tidy it all was, as if you could wrap up betrayal in neat little forms and signatures. I stared at the last page for a long time. Beneficiary, Melissa Hartley. No note.
No epality. Not even a sticky tab.
Just my name, printed like it belonged there all along. I asked the lawyer if Diane contested anything. He shook his head.
She tried.
But the documents were airtight. Because I made them that way.
He didn't ask how.
Maybe he didn't want to know. On the drive home, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt emptied out. Like I'd spent so long chasing this final blow, I forgot there'd be an after. Justice doesn't come with music. There's no swelling soundtrack when you win. It's quiet. Still. Sometimes unbearably so. I pulled into the driveway of my mother's house, now legally mine again, and just sat there. The porch light was still broken. The paint on the shutters was peeling. Her hydrangeas were overgrown, leaning toward the walkway like they'd been waiting for her. I sat there until it got dark. Inside, I walked through the rooms with a kind of reverence, like I was tiptoeing through a memory. Everything was still. Her books were still there. Her tea mug. Even her old shawl, draped over the reading chair. I touched it and felt a lump in my throat so big I had to sit down. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like the aftermath of a fire, when the flames are gone but the air still smells like smoke. I didn't call anyone. Didn't text. Just stayed there on the floor, with her shawl in my lap and the silence pressing in. This was what was left of love, a house, a ledger, and the echo of a woman everyone tried to erase. But I remembered. I had proof. And now I had everything she meant for me to have, even if it came soaked in ash. The first Mother's Day after the funeral, I woke up before the sun.
No alarm.
Just something in my chest pulling me out of sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor for a while. The world was quiet, like it was holding its breath. I made coffee, stood in the kitchen barefoot, watched the light come through the blinds in slanted lines. The album sat on the dining table, closed. I hadn't touched it since that night in the house. But I didn't need to. I knew every page by heart. I scrolled through my photos until I found it, a picture of my mom standing in her garden, holding a potted lavender plant. She's laughing at something off camera. Her hands are dirty. She looks alive. I uploaded the image to a print-on-demand service, selected a matte finish, and added the caption, "Thinking of you always." I had it shipped to Diane's new address. I'd found it in the public court records, a small apartment she rented after the estate settlement. 1 bedroom.
No patio.
She didn't reply. I didn't expect her to. The second year, I sent a photo of my mom reading on the porch, her legs tucked under her, glasses slipping down her nose. Third year, a Polaroid from 1989, my mom holding me as a baby in the hospital bed, exhausted but radiant. Every year, I sent another. No return address.
No explanation.
Just the image and those same 4 words. Some people might call it petty, but it's not revenge. It's memory. It's what she tried to erase, gently stitched back into Diane's life like a splinter under the skin. I don't imagine Diane frames them. I don't care if she burns them. She still has to open the envelope. Still has to see the face of the woman she tried to become. And she has to remember that someone remembers. That she didn't win. Grief doesn't go away. It just finds quieter places to live. I started noticing my mother in little things. The way I stacked dishes, the songs I hummed in the car, how I instinctively reached for peppermint tea when my stomach hurt. I never decided to become like her. I just did. Her handwriting was still on the back of old recipe cards I found in the kitchen drawer. Add nutmeg, trust me. Or no margarine. Ever. I kept them all, slid into a binder. Sometimes I'd open it just to feel close to her. People talk a lot about forgiveness. As if it's the final act of healing. As if letting go is the goal. But I don't think my mother would have wanted me to forgive Diane. I think she would have wanted to be remembered. Not with vengeance, but with truth. So I made that my ritual. I tended her garden.
Fixed the porch swing.
Cooked her chili the way she liked. With extra cumin, no beans. I didn't do it for closure. I did it because it kept her real. Present. There were days I still felt the weight of it all. I drive past hospitals and feel sick. Sometimes I'd wake up at 3 a.m. and instinctively check the album, just to make sure it still existed. Like if I didn't look, it might disappear. Like it had all been a dream. But it wasn't. She had existed. She had suffered. And they had tried to erase her. And now she had her story back, even if only one person ever read it. One afternoon, while cleaning the attic, I found a box I hadn't seen before. Labeled in my mom's handwriting. For M when she's ready. Inside was a small tin, filled with clippings, ticket stubs, birthday cards, a lock of baby hair and tissue paper. At the bottom, folded in 2, was a letter. I opened it with shaking hands. If you're reading this, I'm probably not around. But I know you. I know you'll look for the truth. I just hope it doesn't hurt you more than it heals you. You've always been stronger than me. And you remember everything. That's your power. Be safe, my girl. Be exacting. Be bold. I didn't cry at the funeral, but I cried then. For all the words I never got to say. For all the things she never got to explain. But also for the quiet knowing between us. That I'd done what she expected. That she knew who I was even before I did. This morning, I sent the photo early. It was the one of her in the blue sweater, leaning against the oak tree in our backyard, arms crossed, smirking at the camera like she knew something no one else did. The light hit her just right in that photo. Warm and gold, like the world was saying sorry. I printed it on fine linen paper this time. No note, no signature, just the same line. Thinking of you always. I mailed it 2 days ago, so Diane probably got it today.
She's still out there.
I checked, once. Still lives in that small apartment. Doesn't go by Kessler anymore, just her maiden name. I doubt anyone calls. I doubt she tells people where she used to live, what she used to be. Sometimes I wonder if she ever looks at the photos, or if she throws them out, still sealed. Maybe she thinks if she doesn't see it, it won't be real. But I know better. I don't need a courtroom. I don't need headlines. I just need her to remember.
Just once a year.
One envelope. One moment where she flinches, even if no one else sees it. That's enough. It took me years to understand that justice doesn't always look like a punishment. Sometimes it's a mirror. Sometimes it's just the weight of being remembered for what you did. And me? I live a quiet life. Still in the house. Still tending the garden. I adopted a dog named Clover, who likes to sit in the same chair my mom used to. I go to work. I come home. Some weekends I drive out to the lake and read her favorite books. I don't need revenge anymore. Because everything she tried to steal from my mother, the peace, the dignity, the memory, all of it lives here now.
In me.
I used to think I was just surviving, just trying to stay upright after everything. But now I see it clearer. I'm not surviving.
I'm continuing.
Because I was never her daughter. I was always my mother's. And that, in the end, was what saved me.